My name is Hillary Carter. I am the Managing Director of the Blockchain Research Institute, a global think tank that's based in Toronto, Canada. And it is my great pleasure and honor to be the moderator for this morning's, this morning's webinar on oil, gas, and Bitcoin mining, storing energy of the future. I am joined by three leaders and experts in the Bitcoin and blockchain space. And get ready for an incredibly informative and exciting discussion. I'll take a few minutes to introduce each of them, and then we'll go through some individual questions. As a point of housekeeping, I'd like to invite everybody who's joined us today to please submit questions in the chat. We'll try to address those at appropriate junctures in the webinar, either throughout or leave questions to the end, but I'd like to encourage everybody to participate in that capacity. So let's begin. I will introduce our panelists and experts this morning. I'll begin with Greg Foss. I've known Greg for many years. It's a terrific pleasure to have him join us this morning. Greg is SVP, Senior Vice President of Business Strategies for Bitcoin at Validus Power. Greg spent 27 years in the financial markets. He's worked as a portfolio manager, fixed income and bond trader, in credit trading and analysis, and has been involved in a Bitcoin fund that currently exceeds 225 million Canadian in assets. Greg, is that figure still accurate based on where we are today? Do you expect?
You know what? It's crazy. Firstly, there's two disclosures. I have sold all my shares in 3iQ. So I was a founder at 3iQ. I'm very proud of their accomplishments. They currently manage close to $1 billion of Bitcoin. They also manage an Ethereum fund. I was a founding shareholder, and I joined 3iQ as nothing more than an advisor, but I helped bring Sean Cumby over. Now, you know Sean. Sean is one of the smartest people I've ever met in this space as CIO, and 3iQ certainly has left their mark on the markets in Canada. It's a wonderful thing that Canadians have been able to participate in the growth of Bitcoin. So yeah, Hillary, you know what? They probably invested maybe, I'm going to guess, 400 million, and it's up to $1 billion. So thereabouts, rounding error. Canadians have made close to half a billion dollars on Bitcoin because of this fund, and because of Sean Cumby's ability to get on the stand and convince the OSC that this on-ramp was valuable. So now what do we have? We have Purpose, who just raised $421 million in 2 days as a Bitcoin ETF. We can discuss the difference between the two. At the end of the day, though, this is so valuable for Canadians as an on-ramp, and Canada was the leader in ETFs. I'm not sure if you guys knew this. They launched the first ETF ever globally, and now they launched the first Bitcoin ETF globally, and that was Purpose Investments. There's 2 listed in the market right now and 3 more on the way. It's crazy. It's good. Why? Because Bitcoin is good.
Here, here, and for full disclosure, I am a shareholder in 3iQ. My husband worked with Greg to set up said closed-end fund, and I'm a unit holder in both the Bitcoin fund and the Ether fund that 3iQ has launched. So that's clearing the air on that. Greg, you've also, you describe yourself as being on the line between enthusiast and realist. And you've embraced Bitcoin as a hedge against traditional currencies. You suggest that's prudent risk management. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, and I won't steal anyone's thunder here. Look, I spent 27 years trading high yield credit and credit default swaps. I worked at a hedge fund in Canada, a very successful hedge fund led by Mike Weckerly. I'm not sure if many Canadians know him, but if you haven't, he's on Dragon's Den. He's a colorful man, currently owns a large piece of Mogo Financial, which is a really interesting play. What I did for 27 years is try to evaluate credit quality of junk borrowers. And the funniest thing is the worst borrowers that I ever saw were the balance sheets of federal governments, okay? Bar none, federal governments only have a credit rating, a top rated credit by S&P and Moody's because they can print money. And that's absolutely a felony. We need to hedge that. Currencies or fiat currencies are guaranteed to debase. It's only math. I could walk everyone through the math, but at the end of the day, yes, everybody needs Bitcoin as a hedge to fiat debasing. It is a mathematical certainty that fiats will debase. So I did write a paper comparing Bitcoin and the valuation of Bitcoin to default swaps on sovereign nations. And these sovereign nations put a value of this methodology, rather puts a value on Bitcoin of between 110,000 US and 160,000 US right now. Now that's one methodology for valuing Bitcoin, but credit runs the world. Do not ever overlook credit default swap markets. And I know I've just lost 99% of the people listening, but credit default swaps run the world, and they were the precursor to the financial meltdown in 2008, 2009, okay? If you want to learn about markets, flip right over equities and go into credit, because credit runs the world, full stop.
Yeah, and well, I'm going to get back to you on diving into Bitcoin and you know, CDS and that a little later. I'll come back to you, Greg, on that. Let me introduce Jamie Leverton as Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian-based Hut 8 Mining, which has just reached what we call in Canada narwhal status by its valuation. So unicorns are companies that reach $1 billion in Canada. Our unicorns are narwhals. Congratulations, Jamie, on this achievement at Hut 8.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. It's exciting. Thank you, Greg. Yeah, so I took over the helm of Hut 8 Mining on December 1st. And we've made a series of strategic hires, a series of strategic announcements, and obviously the market has been moving in our favor and incredibly receptive to all of our news over the last 2.5 months. So yeah, I'm excited and proud. It's really something to lead a Canadian company that's at the forefront of this intersection and this place and time.
Indeed. So a little bit about Jamie. Jamie's driven the operational reimagining of some of Canada's most important technology companies. And she's taken increasingly senior roles with organizations like East Structured Data Centers, Cogeco Pier 1, National Bank, BlackBerry, Bell Canada, and IBM Canada. So nobody more qualified to take the helm at Hut 8. Jamie has an MBA in Marketing Informatics from Dalhousie University and a BA in Psychology and Political Science from the University of Ottawa. Welcome, Jamie. Congratulations on your new role at Hut 8, and looking forward to digging into questions with you. I'll move to Mohammed El Masri. Finally, we just call Mo, founder and CEO of PermianChain. And for full disclosure, PermianChain is a valued member of the Blockchain Research Institute. I've had the pleasure of collaborating with Mo for a number of years. He's done webinars at the BRI. He has participated in our conferences. He sponsored our global digital conference, Blockchain Revolution Global, and gave an important keynote speech there. A little bit about Mo. He spent the last few years bringing his expertise in structuring tailored alternative investments and financing solutions for privately held companies to Canada's oil and natural gas industry, as well as developing PermianChain. He's a director and CEO of Brox Equity, a Calgary-based energy and Bitcoin mining investment company. He previously led the corporate finance division for Ento Capital Management, which is a Dubai-based investment advisory firm. And I should say thank you to Mo, because you are the instigator of today's conversation. Thank you for bringing us all together.
Thank you all for taking the time to be part of this. And it's really an honor for me personally. And I really enjoy speaking to each and every one of you. It's the first time we will be speaking. Well, it's my second time today speaking with Jamie, but I mean, great experience. I, come from a corporate finance background. So I don't have my uncles and father are IT people, but from the sales side. So I have a little bit of that, but it's more of corporate finance for me, and everything I've been looking at when it came to the oil and gas sector in Canada was from that perspective. It was from the perspective of cash flow. It was from the perspective of optimizing cash flow for oil and gas companies across Canada, and realizing that the oil and gas sector in Canada is the major contributor for public sector revenues, whether it's through taxes or government, and that in turn translates into subsidies, it translates into schools, it translates into homes, hospitals, healthcare. So I think we need to all play our role in the Canadian energy sector to push that forward. To remove the myth around the environmental issues around oil and gas, even though to a certain extent some of these issues may be available, but maybe not to the extent that they are being exaggerated in the media and in political arena. And maybe I will not get too deep into that, but my perspective is that solve cash flows for oil and gas companies, optimize their stranded and wasted energy resources, then you'll have a more vibrant economy, a more vibrant community. And I guess we'll talk more about how tokenization and Bitcoin mining falls into that play throughout this webinar.
Yeah, that's perfect. We'll look into digging into the how that all manifests. Let me go back to Greg and we'll talk about investing. Greg, I'm an investor. Why should I include Bitcoin in my investment portfolio?
Excellent question. And it comes down to this. Typically, if we look at the any pension funds portfolio, or even most investors, retail investors, they had this model called the 60-40 model, right? 60% equities, 40% bonds. It was a combination of growth and preservation of capital. Now, over the last 40 years, interest rates have gone from 14% in the US and higher in Canada down to next to zero over the last 40 years. If people understand bond pricing, that just means as interest rates go down, bond prices go up. We're now at a point, an inflection point in my belief that bond prices are capped. We will not see increasing bond prices. In fact, we will see increasing bond yields. When bond yields increase, bond prices go down. There will not be meaningful capital gains in bonds in the next 15 years, in my opinion. So the 60-40 model, which is set up to meet a prescribed rate, let's say CalPERS has a prescribed rate of 8%. Well, if 60% of your, 40% of your portfolio being bonds is currently yielding about 1.5% 10-year treasuries, 4% on high yield debt. Well, how do you get 8% if 40% of your portfolio is yielding between 1 and 3%? Okay, means that equities have to return, 16%. Now, they can return 16%, but they can also have negative years. What you need to do is you need to hedge. And one of the reasons you need to hedge is because some of those returns are in fiat dollars. In fact, all of those returns are in fiat dollars. So if you think of your house as gaining value, well, maybe what's actually happening is your house is maintaining its value, but the fiat currency that's used as the unit of account is losing value, which is exactly what's happening. So your house is not gaining value. Your house is maintaining value, but the unit of account is losing value. So everyone says, oh, I make so much money on real estate. You're actually not making any money. You're just losing purchasing power with fiat. What Bitcoin does is preserves store of value. Very simply, money is technology, okay? And money has always been a way of storing the energy or time or work that you put in today to be used for consumption in the future. That is all money is. Okay? It's energy, it's thermodynamics, it's conservation of energy. Well, Bitcoin is the purest form of monetary energy ever invented. Bitcoin will only have 21 million. It is digital energy. It is programmed to increase in value, whereas fiat is programmed to decrease in value. Hence, any 60-40 model portfolio with 40% basically capped yields and probably going to lose money net over the next 15 years needs a replacement. And in my opinion, Bitcoin is the best asymmetric trade I have seen in my 32 years of managing money. I say that bar none. I have never seen a better risk-adjusted trade in 32 years, okay? Doesn't mean with certainty that it will go higher, but if it does, and if it goes to where I think it could, this is still a rounding error at $50,000, okay? And everybody who owns 0 Bitcoin is actually more exposed to risk than people who have a 5% portfolio weight. Bitcoin is a hedge to all the central bank shenanigans going on in the world.
Yeah, and I would add simply to say that in the quest for yield, I mean, there's a lot of market risk. We're at the height of a bull market in equities. Yields are at all-time or almost all-time lows, and people are looking for a way to get a return on their investment. Why don't you think more mainstream analysts and media are embracing this narrative or are communicating these opportunities in a factual way instead of focusing on some of the more nefarious concepts associated with crypto assets?
So it's like everything, right, Hill? At the end of the day, these guys work for banks, a lot of them, and the banks are baked, okay? Banks are 25 times levered to their capital base. People don't understand how banking works, but basically banks need fiat debasing in order to continue lending at a 25 times leverage. What that means simply is they only have $4 of capital for every $100 of loan they make. Fiat debasing is a necessity in commercial banking. If these analysts work for commercial banks, do you think maybe they're somewhat biased against Bitcoin? Okay, potentially. Let's just throw that out. More than anything, though, people tend to be, they have a bias, a bias towards what they're used to. And Bitcoin is a new technology. Let's be very frank about that. Bitcoin is the coolest financial technology I've ever seen. But until you've actually picked up a wallet and transferred money in under 10 minutes across the world to someone you've never met, and there is no financial intermediary involved in this, you have never seen the beauty of Bitcoin. Okay, I've on a number of times sent money to Australia or to San Francisco to sponsor record Bitcoin developers, and I've never met the person. And it arrives in 10 minutes, and there was no bank, no MasterCard, and very reasonable fees. Okay, distributed ledger that can always be proved, no counterfeiting. It's beautiful. You try and convince that to someone who's, don't forget, I grew up, when I graduated from my MBA, that's not true. When I graduated from McGill, I had never used a personal computer. And then when I graduated from my MBA, I had barely used a PC or an Apple Macintosh at the time. But there's now more power in your iPhone than was required to put 2 men on the moon. Okay, so the funny thing is, all these people who diss Bitcoin grew up like me. They didn't understand the technology. They're not used to it, like the young kids are today. And these people, their natural bias is, it's never going to take over our system. Our system rock and rolls. Guess what? All fiats fail. And it's been 90 years. And the average life of a fiat currency is about 100 years, okay? All fiats fail. You need to hedge that. And the people that are telling you you don't, you better ask yourself, are they like the postman that said, oh, email, how could that ever happen? There's no threat from email. Oh, so said the Postmaster General. Okay, wake up, people. Who are you listening to?
Let me speak to something important, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that once you make that first transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain, your life changes. The light bulb goes on. I want to ask Mo and Jamie and you, Greg, about your very first interaction sending Bitcoin or receiving Bitcoin. When was it? How was it transformational? Jamie, let's go to you.
Yeah, so for me, it was back in 2017 when I first came around the space, and the magic isn't so much in the transaction for me. It's in the history. It's really understanding what is money and how Bitcoin as a store of value is the hardest, most beautiful form money has ever taken. For me, that's where the wonder really came in, and it sits within me still.
Yeah, I love that history and the origins and the speculative origins of Bitcoin, and the headline of, Chancellor on the brink of third bailout for banks coded into the Genesis block. Like, I think that whole history of the need for a different kind of money is really fascinating. Mo, how about you?
Yeah, for me, it was around 2017, early 18. And it was my very first transaction where I didn't send Bitcoin, I received some Bitcoin. I was at the time doing consulting on a self-employment basis, and one of the individuals that I was consulting had a restaurant business in UK, and they were supposed to pay me my fees, a very small amount of fees, retainer for my time, and they sent it to me in US dollars. At the time I was living in Dubai, and it would not arrive. A month later, I did not receive the money because it had to go through an intermediary bank and convert from sterling pound to US dollar. My name is Mohammed Al Mazri, by the way. I'm living in Dubai with a UAE bank account, and a whole bunch of KYC requirements were required a month later for the usual. And I just asked them to cancel the transaction and send me in Bitcoin. I received the money in 10 minutes. And I lived off of that Bitcoin for 3 months because it was appreciating in value. And at the time I was having my first newborn who was premature. In 4 months we were at the hospital. I was out of a job, and Bitcoin literally changed my life because I was living off of it for 4 months. And that was a turning point in my life where I realized what money needs to take shape as, and saw the whole shift in money and how the social construct or the socio-economic construct of the world is just not properly constructed, and there's this shift in wealth that's taking place through this new form of money.
Thanks, Mo. Greg, your first Bitcoin.
So this is interesting. My first Bitcoin actually was in 1988. And you guys are going to say, okay, Foss, I'm calling you out. I'm calling you out. It's impossible. Bitcoin didn't happen until the white paper. And I'll tell you what my first experience was. I graduated from MBA in the US, came back to Canada, and I worked at the head office of Royal Bank of Canada. And my first project was Brady bonds for Latin American debt countries. It needed to be bailed out because they had all defaulted on their debt. And long story short, we had about $1 billion of Latin American debt to Mexico. And it was my project to price that debt and determine what Brady plan option I was going to take for the Royal Bank of Canada, Canada's largest financial institution. And I said, well, before I do that, and I'm working directly for the CFO, before I do that, I better look at our whole portfolio. And long story short, we had about $4 billion in total exposure to lesser developed countries. Brazil was about $1 billion. Mexico was about $1 billion. Philippines, Vietnam, everything else accounted for another $2 billion. We had about $4 billion of debt. It was all defaulted. And Brady plan option was for the Mexican portion. But the average trading price of the debt was 25 cents on the dollar across all the countries. Well, you do a quick calculation, $4 billion, 25 cents on the dollar, meaning you have to write down $3 billion, okay? I'm a greenhorn. I look at our book value of equity and I'm like, holy shit. Excuse my language, holy shit, the Royal Bank of Canada does not even have $3 billion of book value of equity. I had just graduated from school and I'm working for Canada's largest financial institution and it's insolvent. Full stop, insolvent. And the Royal Bank of Canada wasn't the only one. The Brady plan was set to rescue all money center banks in the US as well, because they were in exactly the same situation. They were all insolvent. Full stop, ladies and gentlemen. I need you to understand this. This started in 1988. And here I am. I'm like, firstly, I go to our CFO. I go, Emil, this is horrendous. And he goes, I know, don't tell anybody. Okay. I'm not trying to throw Emil under the bus, but I'll just tell you, financial analysts looking at the banking sector had no clue. This is so dangerous, but true, 1988. So I said, how is it that banks maintain a high credit quality? And the answer is because they have a federal backstop. Most of these banks are too big to fail. They cannot fail. It is impossible or the system will collapse. So how does the backstop work? Once again, the federal government can print this piece of crap called fiat money. So since 1988, I was looking for a solution to this thing called fiat money. And in 2014, 15, and 16, I got introduced to Bitcoin and I went down the rabbit hole hard. And Fred Pye, for all his good things he's done and for the Canadian market, he basically convinced me this. He didn't have to convince me. I found what I'd been looking for 20 years. But it only happened since the white paper. And quite honestly, again, it's because the system needs it. Bitcoin is necessity because the system is built on fiat money printing. Full stop.
Awesome. Great story. There's a question that I think we could take from Magnus. Alan, thanks, Magnus. How is the pandemic likely to change adoption? Is rising government debt part of the reason why adoption has accelerated so much over the last 6 months? Who'd like to speak to that? Anybody want to kick that around?
Well, I think we're all going to have the same answer, right? It's a global printing of fiat currency in the face of the pandemic has absolutely massively accelerated the movement of institutions to take Bitcoin onto their balance sheet as a hedge. It's something that would have happened anyway, has been accelerated probably tenfold. We'll never know how much this pandemic has caused as far as an acceleration, but every day we see a new institution making a big move exactly for this reason.
Mm-hmm. Mo, do you have comments?
I share the views. This fiat money printing the stimulus is putting back money into the cryptocurrency space, and this is what I've seen even from friends and family members who have taken that advantage to see what it's all about, because the majority of the world are new to Bitcoin and let's call it the mainstream, and they're now getting into it because there's this excess amount of money that's coming in. But this economic struggle globally that's taking place, and most people are having a challenging time within their households or with their jobs or on a personal level, has got people to reflect on maybe we do need a new form of money, maybe we do need a new way to spend money, maybe we do need a new monetary policy, and Bitcoin provides that just by its very nature.
So
Greg,
can I just add this? You guys are all correct, except the funny thing is the pandemic was just the pin that pricked the balloon, okay? The balloon started inflating in 1988 when I mentioned the Latin American debt crisis. Then the great financial crisis in 2008, 2009 merely transferred leverage from the banking system to the government, okay? The too big to fail. What did the government do? Printed money to rescue these guys. Now there was one failure and it was called Lehman Brothers. Did you know, however, that in 2006, 3 years before Lehman Brothers defaulted, you could buy default protection on Lehman Brothers for 9 basis points, which meant for $10 million of debt that you wanted to insure, it cost you $9,000 a year. 3 years later, that contract was worth about $6 million bucks. Okay, why? Because Lehman, which was termed to be too big to fail, actually wasn't too big to fail. But Bear Stearns got rescued by JP Morgan, and the leverage essentially in the financial system got QE'd and kicked down the road onto the government balance sheet. So the pandemic is the pin it's pricked the balloon, because the total debt to GDP is now unsustainable. It means that our debt is growing faster than the economy just because of the coupon on the debt. Very simple. We can never get out of this. It's mathematically impossible to escape this debt spiral. Anybody who doesn't take math or understand math, which includes Justin Trudeau and all those idiot modern monetary theorists out there, they need to study math. The fiat currency is the error term in a debt to GDP spiral. It's over. Full stop.
I see a question from Laura, but I want to give Jamie the opportunity to talk a little bit about energy, which is our theme for today's discussion. And Jamie, what's your perspective on how large public companies are changing the way that they manage their energy requirements, and how does that all fit into this discussion around Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think when I think about large public companies and how they're looking at energy, I think really the focus tends to be more on how they're thinking about their environmental, social programs and their policies around sustainability and sustainable energy. And we certainly see a big focus on those narratives coming out of large institutions. And there's always an active conversation around Bitcoin and Bitcoin's dependence on large scale energy. And actually, this morning, Validus Power and Hut 8 announced a partnership where we are actively partnering together to work on building out a mobile energy management fleet with data center capabilities attached to it, to specifically be able to mine Bitcoin using wasted energy. So looking at the use of sour gas, field gas, flare gas, being able to capture it, clean it, and turn it into Bitcoin through a mobile fleet. So we're incredibly excited for that opportunity to do something really innovative and different in this space, and really combining the energy narrative from a sustainability perspective, and Bitcoin being the output that drives that type of innovation that can ultimately do so much good for our planet as if we're able to build this out at scale.
Yeah, congratulations on this partnership and this initiative. I think it's incredible. And is it, part of a response to the argument that, well, Bitcoin uses more energy than Argentina, therefore Bitcoin is bad? Are you leading the charge in an energy efficient process?
Well, we're certainly on the leading edge of innovation in this subject matter. Absolutely. I think it's such a red herring when people make those comparisons to Bitcoin's energy use and don't talk about the hyperscale cloud use of energy, the mainstream data centers, your Facebook, Amazon, Googles of the world, how much energy their data centers consume globally. But Bitcoin always gets this head on. And I do think that we have an opportunity here by using a mobile fleet to go into places that otherwise there was not an economic justification to do so. So by driving an economic justification into places where we can actively convert wasted energy into a positive resource, I just think is incredible. And that's the kind of innovation that we really need to see, not just to change the narrative around Bitcoin, but to change the world.
So what does that setup look like? Are we talking about mining farms on wheels that go to sites where there's excess wasted energy? Do you want to break that down a little bit?
That's exactly what we're talking about. And since Greg is Validus, I'll let him jump in here. But that's exactly it, Hillary. That's what we're trying to build.
It's so exciting as an engineer to see this, as a mechanical engineer, to see the cleaning of the dirty gas, the ability to wheel it in and set up within a 6-hour time frame. 35 megawatt trucks. Okay, these are not small projects. These are big, very substantial units, and again, mobile, and that's really neat. Here's what's very important too. There's two things. I'll say this: Bitcoin doesn't consume does not waste energy. It consumes energy waste. Okay, very important. Secondly, Bitcoin mining can be actually used to stabilize the electricity grid. You saw what happened in Texas just recently with the brownouts, and the grid was very close to collapse, okay? Imagine we have these mobile miners that are mining 97% of the time, but are also connected to the grid so that they can flip a switch, and they can actually provide peaking power to the energy grid to stabilize the energy grid, okay? This is so important. Now, on the subject of how much energy Bitcoin wastes, according to the the boiling the oceans crowd, let's just ask a question. How much money does the U.S. military, how much energy does the U.S. military waste in order to protect the reserve currency asset of the world, being the U.S. dollar? Just throw that out. You think the U.S. military spends and wastes a lot of energy? I think they do. And how about central banking? Do you think central banking might use a little bit of energy? I think so. So all you boil the oceans people and everything, I agree. Climate control is a very important thing, but Bitcoin can actually solve this. It is not your enemy, it's your friend. And the more people that understand this and see this in action, congratulations to Jamie and Hut 8. Yes, I am involved in Validus Power, but I'm a very small component. Our CEO, Todd Short, is a visionary. And I think Hut 8 and Validus Power are going to be joined at the hip for a long time to come. I'm excited about it as an engineer. I'm excited about it as a Bitcoiner. And I guess I will disclose, I do own a little bit of a little bit of Hut 8 stock, and it's up 40% today. Jamie's biggest competitors are, it was up 40, I guess it's up 30 now. Jamie's biggest competitors are all down. Yeah, you might think that maybe the announcement made today has some people thinking that Bitcoin miners could potentially be the banks of the future. I want people to think about that. Bitcoin miners could be the banks of the future, because the banks of the present, they don't work. They are regularly insolvent. Okay, come at me, all you people and all you guys who hate and own Bank of Canada stock, but that's the truth.
Yeah, that brings me to the point that I too am a Hut 8 shareholder. For full disclosure, I'm delighted with 40% bump today. So that gets that off the table too. I want to turn to Mo now on the discussion of digital stores of energy and how tokenized natural gas reserves on the blockchain are changing the energy industry. And then we'll go to those questions in the chat.
Sure. I've always looked at the oil and gas sector from a financial point of view. So I'm not a geologist, not a petroleum engineer. My colleagues and partners are, and I leave that expertise to them. But from my perspective, you know, a very important sector of the global economy requires consistent cash flow or consistent capital investment. In order to attract liquidity to the sector, you need to have innovation moving forward with the way things are going today. You do have this environmental issue, but Canada is the most responsible energy producer in the world, and we have responsible energy production. there is no way we can eliminate the emissions that are or the flaring or the CO2 emissions or the methane emissions that are happening around the world immediately. The best we can do is reduce it, and Bitcoin mining does that. It reduces emissions to a certain extent, and that is just part of the contribution that Bitcoin mining offers to Canada's vision for 2030 to be a net zero emissions, to have net zero emissions. Now, when you are able to look at the natural gas or the energy resources that are available in abundance across Canada and across North America, and where most of them are, or most of these sites are either lacking in infrastructure to take that gas to market. And as Jamie said, you need to find that commercial justification or that economic justification. And you cannot really have any commercial justification for these stranded assets, which become a liability and a huge opportunity cost for most of these energy producers, which ultimately is an opportunity cost for our government, for our communities, for the people of that can benefit from these natural resources. So if there's nothing you can do with it other than consume it on site, convert it into energy or electricity, now find the use for that electricity, the most viable solution today is mining Bitcoin because of very obvious reasons that are happening in the market. Now, if I'm able to tokenize a bunch of stranded natural gas resources, not just, and for everybody's sake, tokenization is similar to securitization, minus the packaging of a financial product. So it's
and the bricks and mortar.
and the bricks and mortar. So if you're able to tokenize all this stranded energy reserves in the form of a digital token that is able to be utilized between people, whether it's peer-to-peer or business-to-business, then you're able to have a digital store of energy that can be transferred between people for the use of Bitcoin mining. And this is where we believe, and because Bitcoin is a monetary energy, which, as Greg said earlier, money is simply a store of energy where you're able to, consume human efforts, and in exchange for those human efforts, you get money, and then you're able to take that energy that you put in somewhere else and spend it for goods and services. And Bitcoin is exactly that. You're able to consume it from energy, literally, pack it into a digital currency, and then be able to spend it much more efficiently and more convenient and much more transparently. And this is where I see tokenization being able to fit in the energy play, to create digital stores of energy, allowing people to access the Bitcoin mining sector, whether they were to own one ASIC or 100 ASICs, they're able to access that through having affordable power and on sites that would otherwise just be stranded and not benefit the communities around it.
And let it be said that monetary energy, that is Bitcoin, is what gives it its security, its unique properties. Value. It's what gives it its intrinsic value. So speaking of value Bitcoin, I'm going to go to Laura's question, which is today you can buy Bitcoin as a store of value, but still not used as a payment tool. That's true and that's not true. She says, does not affect it negatively given that you can use fiat to buy almost anything. Who wants to speak to that comment in the chat?
I'll just briefly respond to it. And I think Greg is the most qualified one to drip it down. But I think, yes, the majority of institutions and corporations and high net worth individuals and the largest amount of money is going into Bitcoin with a view as an alternative to gold, or a hedge against inflation, or it's being used as an investment vehicle. But that's just where it starts, I think. And then these people that you hear, whether it's MicroStrategy or Square or the ones that are converting their US dollar treasury into Bitcoin, are not buying it to sell it, they're buying it to keep it. And given that Bitcoin has supply scarcity, then the issues around the value is addressed. Now, Bitcoin is a store of value, but it is also being used as a payment tool. I use it as a payment tool. I know a lot of people, everyone on this webinar probably used it more than once as a payment tool. And the network activity that's taking place on the Bitcoin network itself is increasing year over year. And the more active users you have on the network, the more value you have for that network, and you would value it as any telecommunications network. You have an active user base there, and that is really how I look at it. That the user activity is increasing. The current way that it's being used is not going to affect the price, because it is only a matter of time that the current fiat system fails, and that's just my point of view.
Jamie, do you want to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna similar to Mo's point. Hut 8 mining is one of the original hodlers. We've been hodling the excess Bitcoin that we've been mining since we started in 2018, and are really pleased and proud to have over 3,000 Bitcoin sitting on our balance sheet today, all self-mined. And so we don't sell, we hold. And as well, Bitcoin continues to appreciate the way it is. I think a lot of us would answer that question and say, don't sell your Bitcoin, hold your Bitcoins, use your fiat to pay for whatever transactions you need on a day-to-day basis.
Can I add a little story?
Please.
So basically, did you guys hear that story where a farmer walked into town with a cow, and he had a sign on it, for sale, $600,000. And everyone in the town said, that's ridiculous. You're never going to get $600,000 for the cow. And he goes, you watch. So basically, the next day he comes into town, he's got the same cow, same $600,000, the sign for sale sign on it. But the third day he walks into town and he's got 3 chickens. And basically the town folks said, you see, you never would have sold that cow for $600,000. He goes, damn right I did. I got 3 of these $200,000 chickens. Okay, so what does that mean? Fiat is used in exchange for a barter system. Very simply, yes, it works. The value of it keeps changing. So it is not good for a store of value, but yes, it is good for a currency. Because what is a currency? Well, wampum, North American Indigenous Canadians used wampum. Wampum was basically beautiful seashells, mollusks from the Great Lakes. Hey, that was used in exchange for the barter system, right? They use peace pipes. There's all sorts of examples around the world. In Africa, they used jewelry, beads. And how did that go haywire was that the Europeans actually counterfeited the beads and started the actual slave trade in Africa. I don't want to go into all the issues about what a currency replaces. All that it does, though, is it facilitates a barter system, meaning a loaf of bread. You don't need to trade a loaf of bread for a bag of milk. You can purchase both of them for a certain amount of fiat currency. Now, that fiat currency is guaranteed to debase. Mo said it. I believe it. All fiats fail. Bitcoin right now is predominantly a store of value. But the fact that you can use it to provide services and goods like I've done and Mo's done and Jamie's done in terms of sending money to Australia for a Bitcoin dev or a conference to pay a conference. Or yesterday, for example, Validus purchased a piece of advertising real estate on bitbo.io. Now, bitbo.io is, in my opinion, the best Bitcoin dashboard out there. We purchased, for Bitcoin, an advertising slot on that. Could I have paid, and would I have preferred to pay in fiat currency? Yeah, probably. But you know what? Bitcoin was used as the transaction medium, and it settled in 10 minutes, and we didn't need bank accounts. And guess what? It's only a small part of the, of the overall ecosystem. So yes, true. But layer 2 and layer 3 solutions on Bitcoin, like the Lightning Network, and you guys got to listen to this kid, Jack Mallers. This man is friggin' brilliant, okay? They will replace the 7 transactions per second that Bitcoin can do on the blockchain to allow for transactions like the Visa network and everything. Okay. It's important to understand this is coming if it's needed. Jack Mallers is breaking down barriers. And as he says, don't compete or bet against open source networks. You're going to lose every time. And that's what Bitcoin is. The world's largest, most powerful computer network, and it's open source, and people are working on it, and the code is visible everywhere. Again, a thing of beauty, and it will be, if needed, used as a transaction mechanism. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's what gives Bitcoin its unique appeal, the fact that we can use it as an efficient payment mechanism. At the Blockchain Research Institute, we have an incredibly difficult time paying our vendors, especially in the United States. Even if we are to issue a payment, a US dollar check drawn on a US dollar account from a Canadian financial institution is more often than not rejected. Even if it is a draft where the funds have already been cleared out of the bank, that is a major flaw in the financial system today, is cross-border payments. It's far more effective for us to send a payment by Bitcoin, send it, and let the recipient do with it what they will. They can hold on to it or they can convert it back to fiat. But cross-border payments for our vendors are nothing short of a nightmare. So the fact that Bitcoin can be used in this capacity makes it really fantastic. Although I don't want to be the person who buys the pizzas with it today, and nor would I.
So how about this? Have you guys ever tried to personally send a wire transfer, an international wire transfer? You'd think it was their money you were sending, not your own. Like, my God, it's horrendous. Like, what's it used for? When is it supposed to arrive? Well, it won't arrive for 7 days. We're going to charge you $140 on each end. We think you might be an international money launderer, so we're going to really line you up and put you against the wall. Oh, and thanks for banking with us. You know, I mean, come on. I've never seen something so screwy in my whole life. Remittances from, the remittances business, Western Union is solely built on skinning people, sending money back, from their perhaps the US back to their home countries. This will all change. Bitcoin fixes this. Bitcoin fixes so many things, you guys. It's just so exciting. And you don't overthink this. Too many people overthink this. If you own 0 Bitcoin right now, you are irresponsibly short the future reserve asset of the world, in my opinion, because as soon as all energy starts getting priced in Bitcoin, the US dollar has lost its reserve currency status. And if you're Russia or Saudi Arabia right now, do you think you're blowing down the doors to sell your very valuable natural resources for US dollar fiat? I don't know. To me, it doesn't make that much sense. I'd much rather get paid in Bitcoin. And once they do that, Bitcoin will be the reserve asset of the world, and then do some mathematics as to what the value of Bitcoin could be. And my God, there's so many zeros on the end of where it currently is trading. Don't overthink this.
Wait, let me go to Lars. Sorry, go ahead, Tammy.
I would take this opportunity to plug Blockchain Revolution. For anybody out there that hasn't read Don Tapscott's book, when I first went down the rabbit hole, it really helped to understand all of the beautiful applications of this technology, and I would be remiss not to mention it.
Awesome, thank you. I agree. That book changed my life, and
that was the blockchain book.
Yeah. The neat thing about that I took away from that book was micropayments, and how things that are, we usually only have 2 decimal places behind our fiat currency. Bitcoin has 9, you guys. 100 million Satoshis in each Bitcoin. Okay. Can you imagine how that changes things like the music industry and the ability to get royalty payments in fractions of, in like the 4th and 5th and 6th decimal point? Now, Peter Schiff, who's not really good at math, says, oh my God, that means that Bitcoin is not a scarce resource because it can be divisible to 9 decimal places. Well, he obviously didn't pass mathematics 101. Okay. Because it's like dividing a piece of pizza into 8 billion pieces and you can feed the world. Don't overthink this. Bitcoin, there can only be 21 million of them, but those 21 million can be divided into 100 million Satoshis.
There's plenty to go around. There's plenty to go around. Jamie, maybe you could address, we saw question is a concern about the limits to mining Bitcoin and who controls the process. Can you speak to the myth of mining control and whether one should be concerned about a concentration of mining in one region or another?
No, the Bitcoin mining is completely decentralized. It's core to the fabric of how the Bitcoin ecosystem works. There is no central authority. Historically, there's been certain geographies have had more of a concentration than others, but we see that shifting very, very rapidly in this cycle. We're seeing a lot of movement to North America around more mining operations being set up here. Bitcoin pools being established in North America at scale, I think we'll see this year. So no, I don't think people need to worry about any geographic concentration. It's always moving, it's always evolving. It is by its nature completely decentralized. There's no single point of failure, and it's one of the beautiful things of about how the network's built.
As another question, is there a competitor to Bitcoin?
No.
Mohammed?
I don't believe so. Not in my opinion.
I know Greg's answer.
No, perhaps you don't. Yes, there will be. There will be. There isn't today. And the network effect, the reality is I was lucky enough to get involved in Bitcoin when it traded under $500 US. I guess at the end of the day, I think Bitcoin's actually less risky and a better risk return investment now than it was when I got involved at $500. The reason is for things like what Jamie was saying, the decentralized nature, not only of the network, but also of the miners. Yeah, you hear about the Chinese rainy season and everything like that. But the fact of the matter, Bitcoin mining moving to North America is very, very healthy for the ecosystem, the stability of the ecosystem, and ultimately the security of the North American continent. Can you imagine if we were able to move ASICs miners back to North America because of demand from the Bitcoin mining space, okay? And what that does to the security of the chips that right now there's a worldwide shortage of. So let's just look at this. It's only 10 or 11 or 12 years old. There's so much that's happened in the last 12 years. But all of this, there will be a competitor, but things like the Lindy effect right now and the network effects dictate to me that it's, as Michael Saylor says, once you get to that magical billion user level, it's almost over, okay? There will be competitors. I'm not a huge fan of the altcoin space and everything like that, but I'm not going to argue, look, Ethereum's got a market cap of what it has, and there's a reason it has that. And I'm not about to tell you that, it doesn't deserve that market cap.
Yeah. Greg, there's a question
I think
specifically for you. Go ahead, Mo.
Yeah. I think the functions of Bitcoin and the features of Bitcoin versus other altcoins like Ether and whatnot is just different. And that differentiation allows Bitcoin to have that competitive advantage, and these other altcoins are all created by a central organization, most of them, if not all. And Bitcoin is probably the only one that is actually decentralized, that has consensus mechanism amongst its community, which is the miners, the developers, the people using it. So that's the major competitive advantage. Whether something competitive comes along in the future, probably, but as Greg mentioned, once you reach that billion user base, it's pretty much over.
And that's beautifully said, Mo. That's absolutely beautifully said. The key thing to remember here is it's math and code. It's math and code. Let's not try and recreate the purest things in technology. So math and code, 21 million fixed cap. Do your math. Look at the expected value outcomes.
And do your homework. Not all coins are Bitcoin, and there's a reason why. There's a reason why Bitcoin's market cap is what it is. I know we're at the hour mark. I think we might want to have and I don't think I have time for any other questions, but concluding remarks, I'm going to invite everybody to say a few words and wrap up, if you will. Jamie?
Just thank you again for having me. It's been great. We probably could have gone another hour. There's so much to talk about. And I think I would like to leave the audience with we're so blessed in Canada to be able to tap into all of our resources, our innovation, our talent, our natural inclination to collaborate across geographies and across industries. I think there's nobody better poised to be a part of some really incredible growth and innovation in the intersection of crypto and energy. And I think we're so lucky and so proud to be Canadian and be part of this group.
Hear, hear. Mo.
Well, again, thank you all for joining and for taking times off your busy days. My concluding remarks for everyone is really to just play your part. And we live in a world where everyone needs to play a part. We're all trying to find our purpose in life, and really the sole purpose should be the universal purpose, which is the betterment of the Commonwealth or the betterment of the people. And whatever drives that forward, we should definitely be part of that. And I think, that was the main angle that allowed me to leave everything I was doing and focus on the Canadian energy sector and marrying that with the Bitcoin mining and developing all these proprietary digital solutions to allow that to be more efficient and convenient. And I think people need to really look at Bitcoin as that evolution that is going to foster the revolution of the energy and financial markets, which ultimately runs our worldly world, right? And we need, in order to live that life and have the comfortable means of survival, not just the means of survival, and in order to have these comfortable means of survival, we need to all play our part in supporting, the future. And I think Bitcoin is a good segue into that future.
I'd like to invite everybody joining us today to read a report authored by Mo for the Blockchain Research Institute to learn more on oil, natural gas, and blockchain, and to understand how PermianChain is creating value in resource finance and also the sustainability applications that we were talking about today. You can find that on blockchainresearchinstitute.org's website, or reach out to Mo directly to learn more about how his organization is transforming the industry. And Greg, some concluding remarks?
So, well, you were about to say that there was a question straight for me. So what I'll just say is thank you for listening to all the participants. I am open to any direct messages, or my goal is to explain to as many people my belief that Bitcoin is the greatest financial innovation I have seen in 32 years. I'm so excited to be part of the Validus Power team and what we're doing with Jamie. And I do believe Bitcoin miners are going to be the banks of the future. That just means people need to understand how this works. Mo has hit some very salient points. Hillary, the Blockchain Research Institute is a worldwide respected organization, and we really are punching above our weight in Canada. I want to take this time to mention two books that I've read by Canadian authors. Okay, the first one, this book by Jeff Booth. Okay, he's a Vancouver-based author called The Price of Tomorrow. Why Deflation is the Key to an Abundant Future is absolutely an incredible read. And then the other one, and once you know I don't have it in my hand, it's called, it's written by Jesse Berger, another Canadian author. It's called A Book About Bitcoin. And it's a fantastic read. It's got some, it starts with every chapter starts with a quote, and he opens the book with a quote by a friend of mine called Marty Bent, who is doing in the US with Great American Energy what we're trying to do in Canada. Marty Bent writes a great daily email. Marty Bent's quote was, "Fix the money, fix the world." And that's how Jesse opens his book, Fix the Money, Fix the World. Bitcoiners are absolutely optimists. It's a great, great crowd to be a part of. In this world of COVID and all these negative things happening, you are talking to Bitcoiners. Generally, you're talking to a very optimistic person who doesn't get knocked back by government FUD and energy, boiling the oceans, Bitcoin energy FUD. Validus and Hut 8 are going to change the landscape. Okay, I'm so convinced of that, and I'm so proud of Jamie and her team, and being a small part of that. Validus is a bigger part of it. I'm a small part at Validus, but you know, it's sort of neat, Hillary. I worked with David Carter, Hillary's husband, at 3IQ. A lot of people, really good people, aren't at 3IQ anymore, but a lot of those people are venturing off into different places and making their own waves. And I know David's doing some cool stuff. I actually own a piece of his company, a little common stock. And I just encourage everyone out there, please do your homework. Please understand why credit and sovereign default risk will drive the price of Bitcoin higher. I've written 4 papers on that subject. You can get those papers, why every fixed income investor in the world needs exposure to Bitcoin. Very simple. Please do some research. This is not to be feared, right, guys? This is actually an optimistic. This isn't pessimistic. This is optimism. And Mo, thank you very much. Hillary, thank you. And Jamie, thank you as always. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Yeah, great words, everybody. Fantastic and inspiring comments. Everyone watching should educate themselves and read as much as you can, attend webinars like this as much as you can, but also get hands-on with Bitcoin. Go and download a wallet, buy some Bitcoin. If you don't want to hold it, send it to UNICEF. They accept Bitcoin for their initiatives. There are a lot of organizations who accept Bitcoin. Get hands-on and understand the power of peer-to-peer electronic money. I want to thank everybody. It's been an honor and a pleasure to host this conversation this morning. Please reach out with any questions to any of us, and stay safe.